So everyone, we are here tonight with Joey from Texas Hippie Coalition. Joey, thank you. I appreciate you coming to hang out and bullshit. Uh,
Yeah, thank you for having me on, man. What an honor.
yeah. So you are relatively new to THC, joined about 3 years ago, right?
3 years ago, yeah, 2021 is when I joined, yeah.
Right on. So how did that come about for you?
Man, it was funny enough. So the guitar player and bass player in that band used to be in a band with my guitarist in my other band, Locust Grove, way back in the day, called Anti Mortem, and they were from the Oklahoma City area, which is where I live. And I didn't really meet the guitar player and bass player for THC until like maybe a year before I joined the band, maybe 2 years before that. Obviously, I knew him, because the Oklahoma City scene is so small. Everybody kind of knows everybody, and but never really talked to them or hung out with them or interacted with them. And one day, I was working my delivery job. I was delivering cookies at this place called Insomnia Cookies, which is a place that like delivers sweets really late at night.
We've
And I
got
was a
a
delivery driver, and I get a text message from the guitar player in Nevada, and he was like, "Hey man, can I give my singer your number?" I was like, why? And again, at this point, I never talked to him. So, like, the message just kind of came out of nowhere. And I thought that maybe he wanted to do something with Locust Grove, or maybe like there was just a way I could help him. Because at this time, I didn't know that their older drummer, Devin, had left. I had no idea. Um, and I was like, I guess you can give him my number. Like, can you tell me what it's for? And he was like, I don't know what it's for. And he knew, but he
good
was like, I
deal.
don't know what it's for. And so like a day or 2 days later, I get a call from this Texas number, and my phone had smart caller ID. And so when BDR called me and said James Anderson, I was like, who the fuck is James Anderson? So like I went and answered the phone, and he was like, hey, this is Big Dad Rich from Texas Hippie Coalition. I was like, holy fuck, and I had seen the band 4 or 5 times before I joined. The first time I saw them was at Rocklahoma in 2016 when Locust Grove played there. They were on one of the outer stages, and I didn't even catch their full set, but just caught a few songs. And I've seen them a couple times since then. As a matter of fact, before I joined THC, I just seen them like maybe 4 months before I had joined the band. They were just, I think they were playing in Durant somewhere. And so, I've been following them for a little while, and obviously I'm very familiar with the band. And so when he had called, I was like, well, hey, obviously before we go any further, I'm a fan. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm a real fan of the band. And he was like, well, man, like we just lost our guy, and you've been recommended by a few people, and wanted to see if you wanted the position to be the drummer in Texas Hippie Coalition. And I was not expecting him to ask that, because again, I was kind of under the impression that maybe he wanted to do something with my other band, or he wanted something other than just for me to play drums for him. And I was like, well, dude, I had no idea that Devin left. It's like I thought he was still with you guys. I guess I haven't been following their socials around that time, so I didn't know. I was like, well, man, like give me a couple of days to think about it, to really think about this decision. And I think like that next day or the day before, I called back and I said, yeah, man, I'll go ahead and do it. And when I had officially joined the band, I didn't play my first show until like 2 or 3 months after I had joined. So it was more like, hey, I'm the drummer for THC until I go play a show 3 months down the road, until like I'm actually in the band, or
Yeah.
like, so but ever since doing that, man, like I got fired from my job for being on tour, that same job, after doing my first tour of THC. And so you can say since joining that band, a lot of things have changed or turned around since then. But it was kind of like that thing, you're just kind of working at a dead end job. And Locust Grove was still doing quite a bit at that point, but we weren't like actively touring or nothing. And so it was, working your 9 to 5 job every day, like maybe hopefully something will come along, and you're still actively trying to work on doing stuff, and then you just get a random phone call, and sometimes that's just how that stuff kind of happens. So
Yeah, well, that's the truth, and it's like you listen to any band, right? And that's a lot of times that's how people get into those bigger bands. I mean, fuck. I was gonna say Newstead, but Newstead wasn't doing that right and making that call. But you know what I mean? Like there's
Like when that happened to me, it kind of reminded me of like that Rockstar scenario with that movie Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg, and that was like loosely based on Tim Ripper Owens joining Priest, like how he just gets a random phone call, been like, "Hey, you want to come be in this band?" That's kind of how it felt like to me, because again, I wasn't following anything of what that band was doing. I had no idea Devin had even left, and again with Nevada, the guitar player, I at that point we haven't really hung out or spoken much. I'd seen him play a few times, but like we weren't on like talking terms. Not like we were on a bet, not like we weren't friends, but I just didn't really know the dude.
yeah,
And so the for him just to randomly reach out, it was kind of like the planets aligned in some weird way.
yeah, that's fucking cool. But that's right. Obviously, a few people recommended you. You put in the work. You showed that you've got the chops to do something like that. And I'm sure that before BDR called you, he dug into your work and was like, yeah, okay, he could probably do this, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So since you joined, how, aside from like the job, how has life changed for you?
Man, before joining THC with Locust Grove, my other band, and I was averaging maybe about 1 to 2 tours a year. Um, which before that I was touring a lot more extensively, but with that kind of, you know, going at such a slower pace, um, it's definitely changed a lot because I'm now like seeing myself on the road in total about 5 to 6 months out of the year sometimes. And kind of having to adjust normal life to touring life. Like because before then, again, it was maybe 1 to 2 big tours a year. So like I was able to like schedule off work and like plan stuff with friends or girlfriends or family or just whatever. But now it's like you're home for a week and then you're back out for 3 or 4 weeks, and then you're home for a week, you're back out for 3 or 4 more weeks. And so planning things and trying to come up with some kind of schedule has just been insane. And luckily, with the job I have now, they're very understanding of me going out on the road and touring. And my boss is a big fan of the band too, so that helps.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but yeah, man, it definitely has drastically changed a lot. Of have gained a lot of things, lost a lot of things because of it. But doing music as a career is all about making sacrifices to achieve your goals. So
That,
well,
yeah,
I wouldn't trade it for the world, man.
that's fucking cool. It's great you got that opportunity and you took advantage of it and you're like going out and doing it. So like,
Totally, and that's the thing. Like I've always envied, writing songs and being in the studio and practicing and playing here and there. But um, obviously with how much digitally the world has changed now, now a lot of bands are just TikTok bands or YouTube bands where they don't go out and play any kind of shows, or they don't ever tour, they don't ever do this. And I have always said that there's nothing like getting the word out there than just touring endlessly. Just like actually being a live band is like the most important thing a band could do. So I've always thrived and envied just being a live band. And so when it came to just touring that much, it's just like and it's weird to say, like, you actually feel like you're accomplishing something when you're like going out there and grinding and being on the road and playing in front of people and shaking hands and selling merch. You feel a lot more like fulfilled than you do just like sitting at home and making records and putting stuff out and maybe, getting 10 or 15 views or 100 views and been like, man, I'm a musician today. That's what I did. Like I've never thought that way. I've always viewed it as going out there and playing and being on tour. That's how I always felt like stuff was ever accomplished, not just sitting at home and pushing content out into the ocean of
well,
content and really catching a wave.
that's, like I feel like COVID really changed a lot of the musical landscape, right? Obviously, with all the technology we have, there's a lot of people that do that, right? That are out there just playing guitar on TikTok or putting up their videos on YouTube or whatever. And good, dude, if they can do that and make the money at it, like fucking more power to them. But I grew up in a time when there wasn't the internet. I'm back in my day, like the bands, they got together, they recorded demos and they went out and they played shows and they fucking grinded. I mean, you look back at the early punk rock days, or hell, even, early thrash days, and with good metal, they're out in the van, they're sleeping in the van, scrounging for food, making enough money to make it to the next fucking town, hoping that something will happen. And they did that, and they didn't do it for 1 or 2 weeks a year. They did it for 6 or 7 months a year, and that really catapulted them. You look at bands like fucking Slayer and Metallica and, Anthrax, and that's what those guys did. Those early tours didn't make any fucking money, but they were in front of the people, they were playing, they put on a great show, and that's the other part of it, right? The grind and being a good, competent musician when you're out there playing live with everyone.
Totally. And, and as you said, there's no disrespect to people, who sit at home and do drum covers or guitar covers, or the YouTube musicians. I mean, obviously, the game has changed a lot since then, because I was just talking about this to somebody the other day, but like when I when I was first really started getting serious into like playing music and being in bands, like, yeah, the internet was around then, YouTube and all that, but like the landscape was so much smaller to where, like, you didn't have to go through hell to even get noticed or to have somebody even listen to your demo. Now it's a shot in the dark for in a lot of days, and you can't really get any kind of traction or momentum or get any kind of attention unless you like actually go out there and prove yourself. Because I mean, there's a different world, playing guitar or drums on a camera than there is going out in front of a live audience. And I've always said that like the bands that are just strictly internet bands and don't do anything, they have no idea what it's like to play in front of people. That's, to me, that's really like where you're being tested to see like how people in person react to the music that you play versus someone viewing it and not liking or sharing or commenting on it, but giving their real opinion,
Yeah,
like go.
because it's very different, right? Like, because it's almost like listening to an album on record and then going to see the band live,
For
right?
sure.
Like I'm one of those guys. I listen to the record all day and I could love the band, but if I go see you live and you suck, I I'm not a fan anymore, because it doesn't
Totally.
I don't expect it to sound exactly the same. I expect a good show, right? And I just want to be entertained. You can,
Totally. And,
you know,
and I feel like nowadays, like that's what a lot of the big managements and record labels and company really pay attention to is numbers and views and streams. Like I remember even like back in the day, like even just like as little as like getting endorsements, right? Like that, you go to get endorsements and they're just like, all right, let's see your tour dates. How often are you on tour? Like how often, or they want somebody who's like really serious to be part of their company, because at the end of the day, you're like an asset. Or even if you're like looking for management, or if you're looking for a label, if you're pitching your stuff out, it used to just be, hey, like, are you guys actually investing into your craft, whether it's investing money into your band or to your record or to your album, and paying for gas to go to shows, actually, going out there and doing it. But now it's like, well, like, how many followers do you got? It's
that's
like
it. Yeah.
it's like you can never play a show in your life, but if you got 10,000 followers, then yeah, you're immediately bumped to the top of the food chain. But when I was first starting to play music, none of that mattered. It mattered like how many shows do you play a year, like how many records have you sold, or like what's how many people can you get to your show locally. None of that matters anymore. It's all about
Well,
streams, numbers, and views, and
yeah. Yeah, I've got a buddy who manages artists, and that's a guy reached out to him, was like, "Hey dude, listen, I produce, I write. Um, I'm looking for management." And he looked at him and he said, "I'm gonna be honest with you, dude. Like, if I'm gonna give you 2 months, and if you can't hit this threshold, which I think was like 1 million followers, he's like, I just don't have any interest." And honestly, like in the conversation, he told me, he said that's an unrealistic goal. I didn't want to take anyone else on. And that dude figured it out. And like within 2 months, he hit that million followers. And it was like, holy fuck. So he took him on, and the dude actually got signed to some big label for, I don't know, some like high 6-figure bonus. And like, good for you, dude. But
Man, that's the thing. Some people can really unlock that code, man. And like even seeing some of the YouTubers that do music and stuff now, or like content creators, like watching them 10 years ago through now, like you can definitely see the climb. But I feel like there's a certain kind of grind for that kind of stuff, to where like people that get to 1 million views are 24 hours a day, every day, like posting and engaging with people and just like living life digitally. And then there's also the people that are like on the big tours, or like they're session musicians or whatever, to where the other grind is waking up every day and writing songs and jamming and practicing and going to play shows every weekend, that those internet musicians don't really do. But you know, in everybody's field, you know, I respect the grind regardless, because I mean, people that can just wake up and edit videos and make content and be creative and like try to come up with fresh new ideas, that's not an easy thing to do. So like I absolutely respect the people that, you know, make revenue and, you know, have a career of just being a YouTube musician, or being a band that doesn't tour, doesn't play shows, but you know, they're making 6 figures a year, or you know, they don't have to go and sleep in a van in order to pay all their bills. I'm totally, I have so much respect for that. It's crazy, but I'm not built that way. You know, I'm
nah,
not just
it's
wake up every day and been like, wonder what YouTube idea I'm going to make today. I wonder what my Instagram reels are going to look like. Even though that's the world we're living in now. I mean, you adapt and overcome, you know, but I'm just more so built like, okay, like let's pack the drums in a trailer and let's like go out and prove ourselves and play shows and like
yeah.
actually live in the reality of, you know, living through music, you know. And obviously, you know, we got to promote yourself through the internet and do what you can to get people to your shows. But it's like, I don't really see a point in, you know, music becoming your life if you're not actually out there physically doing it and like getting that immediate response from the fans. And, you know, and hell, dude, like I don't know anyone that can say that they don't want to go and travel the country and see a new place every day and meet new people and get to be in certain communities. Like, I don't know one person that just says, "Oh, I don't want to do that. That doesn't
I do.
sound like," you know what I mean? But it's just weird, because you would just think that people want to travel the world and play their music and spread the message and share
Yeah,
their
but
talent with
I
people. But
I think, right, like for you and I, that's how we think, because that's, I play a little bit, but I'm fucking terrible. Never like, never stage, but I like to travel. I like to go to shows, but I know a lot of people who are like, "Hey, dude, I'm good living in my city, knowing the people I know, and I don't want to see other people." And like, hey, cool, right? It takes all types,
totally, totally.
you
And
know?
that's, you know, to each their own, you know, people have done really well from themselves for that. But like me and you, and I mean so many others, it's like I want to go out there and see the world and still play my music and, you know, still convey the message, you know, like especially like growing up, you see all of your favorite bands on tours and they're playing at festivals, or they're just playing shows in general, and you see how the band is playing live and how the fans are reacting, and you're just like, who doesn't want to do that? You know,
Yeah.
who doesn't see that gratification when you play live? It's just something that just can't be replicated, man.
No, no, it's very different. So you came into the band, you guys probably, when did writing for The Name Lives On start after you joined the band?
Well, when I first joined the band, Hellhounds was the first song we ever wrote. When I first joined the band, and you know, coincidentally so, that's the first song on the record. It started kind of pretty quickly. Like right after I joined the band, we probably started writing for it like maybe 2 to 3 months in, 3 to 4 months after I joined, because before I joined, they didn't, their last record was in 2019, which
Yeah.
was High Saddle, which was hugely successful. So, and their mindset, they needed in a way like a comeback record, you know. And since I just joined the band, new lineup, new music, you know, a whole new image, whole new taste. And so yeah, it probably began about 2 to 3 months after joining. And to be honest, all the songs kind of came quickly, because a lot of the guys in the band, which, you know, I only possess a little bit of songwriting talent, but not as much as those guys have, which they I mean they've written hundreds of songs, whether it was in THC or in their former bands. I mean, I do a little bit of it, but not to the extent of that. And
Right.
so when it was like, hey, you know, we got to write this new record, I mean, they were pumping out songs quick. Um, I mean, quick. And, you know, sometimes, you know, musicians can get in writer's block and they can't find any inspiration, or they can't come up with new riff ideas, new fresh ideas. I mean, that did happen, but with this kind of style of music, it's very um not in a bad way, but it's very boxy, right? So like you have a certain area that you can work in that millions of songs can be written in, which, you know, in a guitar player sense, like we always make the joke about it that, you know, we pay our bills using 035. I mean, that's, you know, that's where a lot of the songs are written. But in that box, I mean, you can write millions of songs. And so the creativity aspect is endless. And so when it came to writing this new record, I mean, all the songs were just was coming out, and some of them got denied, and others came in and made the record. But to me, like if you're writing an album, I don't think any song is a bad song because, you know, someone took their time to make it. That it's, you know, their song obviously came from a place of inspiration somehow. And so I will never say an idea is a bad idea, you know, but sometimes it may not just be relevant to the theme of the record, or it just, you know, maybe might make the next one, or may, you know, but I'll never say an idea is a bad one. But yeah, we probably started writing about 3 to 4 months into joining the band, I would say, something like that.
Shit. That's pretty quick. Like, hey, welcome to the band. Write some songs. You're like,
But like I'm pretty sure I probably did maybe 10 or 15 shows, maybe less than that, before it was like, hey, we're gonna start demoing for the new record. And then we didn't go into the studio to record it until like April or May, I want to say, of 2022. It was something like that. I want to say it was like maybe March, April, or May. It was in within those 3 months that we went up to Los Angeles and recorded The Name Lives On, which that was barely over a year since I joined the band when we started like tracking the record. So a lot of that happened very quickly. But I've heard of a lot of people that like join new bands or join bands that are already established, that like you're immediately thrown to the wolves because they have you play a few shows with them. It's like, okay, this guy can play shows, this guy can, you know, handle himself out on the road, but like how is he going to be in the studio, because that's important as well.
yep.
And so I feel like with me, I was kind of in that situation to where it was like, yeah, this guy can do good on tour, he plays well live, but like we got to see how he is under a microscope, under, you know, the pressure of being in the studio. And I like to think I did pretty well.
I mean,
I think.
you're still here, right?
So that's right. You know, like they, you know, we leave on tour in a week, so you know, can't say that I didn't do bad.
Right. So how long is this tour coming up?
So we usually do our tours in about like 2 to 3 week increments, which to me personally, I wish they were a little bit longer. But this one coming up, I think it's about 2.5, 3 weeks. We're going down to Florida and up the Carolinas, and we're doing a lot of East Coast shows, which, you know, a lot of bands do really well on the East Coast and the Midwest. That's why they stay in that area. But I think this one will be about 2.5, 3 weeks. But I remember like when I first started touring, uh, I was doing like 7 or 8 week tours. And then like when I joined this band, it was more so like 2 to 3 week increments, which is something I'm still not used to. You know, which is nice. You know, you get to have a little bit more home time and you're not like getting too burnt out on the road. But to me personally, it's like I'd rather just do the 7 or 8 week tour, get all of that done, and then maybe have a month home.
Yeah.
Not do 2 to 3 weeks on the road, but then be home for a week and then go back out for 2 or 3 more weeks, which is still something I'm getting used to, but I'm never going to complain about being on tour regardless. So
Yeah, no shit. I'm out there making the money.
that's right. And not only just that, I mean, making money, making what you can, but, that's the thing, man. Like when I first started, because I did my first tour when I was 15. I think I was like 15 or 16, maybe. And a lot of those tours I did, you don't make any money. You
Right.
kind of save up your paychecks and you go out and you just kind of live what you have. Which to be in the position I am now, which, I'm able to make some money. I mean, I'm forever grateful for. But like, even if I wasn't making money, I would still to just love just to be out and playing music and networking and communicating and hanging out with people and just being in the atmosphere of being on the road, even if I wasn't making any money at all, because that was the whole principle of it, was to never make any money. It was just like, you're going out there, they say play for exposure, which I know that's kind of a cursed term, but honestly, like back in those days, like that's what you did. You went out there and played for people to see your band and for you to make friends. And I mean, networking even today is still so important, and just meeting people and keeping those relationships, I feel like, to me, is worth more than the money itself.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think most musicians do it because they've got a passion for the music.
Totally.
There obviously there are some people who are like, I'm gonna be, a rock star, I'm gonna do this. But the majority are like, whether I'm making $1 million or $100, I'm gonna go out and fucking play because that's, it's just what it is.
Well, bands nowadays still play for pizza and beer.
Yeah.
Pizza and beer, and a fan will let them crash on the couch or on the floor. I mean, there's still bands that do that, man. And those were the glory days, man. I still say that all the time. Like, just the van tours, man. Like those that was a whole nother world. That's a whole nother reality that even like people nowadays just starting to get into touring. Because I see a lot of bands that are surrounded by a lot of money, right? So like they go and their first ever tours in a bus or in a big Sprinter van, and they got all this awesome stuff. And I see that all the time. And I was like, man, when I was younger, it's like we rented a van from U-Haul, or and we took out the back seat and slept on the floor and lived off of 7-Eleven sandwiches for 3 months on the road. It's
Yeah.
like not a lot of people know how that is, which, as we said earlier, to each his own, whatever makes them happy. But I always reminisce on those days a lot, man. Just being like, everyone's, even like bands like you were mentioning, like Slayer and Metallica and all those guys, they did that same shit.
Yeah.
So every band starts from the bottom and they work their way up. But I still see interviews to where they're always like, yeah, man, I remember crashing on my friend's couch and we would eat cold pizza and this and that. Is like, those are the days that made you who you are. It's like, if you weren't out there grinding and doing those things, a lot of the bands wouldn't be where they were today, but they had to go through those hard and crazy moments to get to where they're at now.
Well,
So
yeah, that's, the pressure makes the diamond, right? Like, and when you're out there grinding, you want to make a better show, write a better song, you want to get more people to your show so you can, you know, maybe have a hot pizza versus the cold pizza, whatever that is. You want to have a Budweiser versus a PBR tonight, whatever. Uh, I mean that's the reality, So it's just a lot of those older bands who stuck with it and did all that, their craft, their songs, they changed and
absolutely.
they became better musicians and all that good shit. So,
Totally.
so for you, 3 years in the band, numerous tours, is there a memory from any of those tours that jump out as like, man, this was just such an awesome fucking experience?
Man, it's crazy. I have a few, but one in particular, it was, gosh, 6 months after I joined the band, we got to do Blue Ridge Rock Festival in 2021, which is very critically acclaimed because of how much of a dumpster fire that whole thing ended up being. But that was a blast. I mean, any time that I get to play festivals, I'm like a kid in a playground, dude, because um, I am a fan through and through. Like I was a fan before I was ever a musician, and I've never let that part of me go. And when we get to do shows like that, even if it's just like basic club shows, I always love to go watch the local bands, and sometimes I'll hang out at their merch table and just talk to them and compliment their set. I mean, that's how I've always been. So we did Blue Ridge Rock Fest in 2021, and we were on the main stage, and we played right before Testament, and I grew up loving fucking Testament, just in that whole era of music. And I remember walking to the side stage, and I was reading the lineup for the main stage, and there was like two other like battle of the bands that like they like enter some kind of competition to play main stage. And then it was us, Testament, Black Label Society, Sabaton, and there was another band. Which I mean, that whole lineup, I was like, I have all their CDs, their T-shirts. Like I was fanboying like crazy. And so we got to play kind of sort of early-ish in the day. And I mean, it was, you have the two big sections in front of the main stage, like all the crowds are. I mean, it was from front to back people. I mean, it was crazy. And still, the whole thing about that festival is that it was way oversold, and people couldn't get to the show on time because the shuttle buses were picking nobody up. I mean, it was a dumpster fire through and through. But I had the time of my life. And I remember after we got done playing, we were loading off our gear, and I go to walk behind the stage down the stairs to like the grounds behind the stage, and I see all the members of Testament coming from like a dressing room, and they're walking to the stage, and I'm walking right by them. And sometimes people get like cold feet when they see their idols or they meet their
Yeah.
heroes or whatever, which I'm like that sometimes. But when Gene Hoglan is obviously a huge influence, and again, just growing up listening to Testament, I I would never forgive myself if I didn't say anything, And so I went up to Gene. I was like, dude, like you get this all the time. I already know, but I cannot tell you how big of a fan I am. Whether it was Death Clock, Strapping Young Lad, anything that guy touches is just gold. And so I took a picture with him, and I was like, dude, I'm going to cherish this for the rest of my life, And I don't know if he knew that I just played right before him, or like I was just like a stagehand or something. I don't, obviously he didn't know who I was, but I mean, I was starstruck. And then right before they played, I go and walk to stage left over by where the monitor console was, and there was Chuck Billy just standing there, just chilling. I mean, and this dude, I'm 6'1", so in perspective, that guy has to be like 6'4", huge dude.
Yeah.
And same thing, I told him, I was like, dude, I just played right before you guys. Like, I'm in Candyland right now. I'll just tell you that. It's like, I'm a huge fucking fan, And I took a picture with him, and he was super cool, And sometimes they say never meet your heroes or never meet the people you look up to. But I mean, damn, dude, like
Now
Gene and
those
like,
dudes are some of the nicest fucking dudes.
man, and that's the thing, like in certain situations you're terrified because you don't want to meet them, and they're such a huge dick, because then you'll never buy their records and this and that. But they were so cool. And when I told Chuck Billy, I was like, hey dude, I just played right before you. I'm a huge fan. He goes, you played right before us on this stage? I was like, yeah. And he was like, I didn't watch you guys, but I heard it and it sounded really killer. And I was like, shut up. Like, don't tell me that,
Yeah.
And I remember playing too. The drummer of Sabaton was standing kind of next to my drum riser watching me play, which again, that was kind of like pinch me moment. And I'm left-handed, so I play drums left-handed, and I know he is a left-handed drummer too. And so what I think happened is maybe some of his crew was watching me play, and he was like, hey, you got to come check out this other left-handed guy and this and that. I mean, like, and I just remember seeing him standing there. This was 2021, so people were still wearing masks and stuff then, but I recognized him. And so he was just wearing a mask and sunglasses, and he was just standing like this. next to me, and I knew who he was. I was like, don't look at him, don't look at him, don't look at him. It's like he's not watching me play. I mean, so like that show in particular was just really huge to me. And then after we got done playing, Testament played right after us. I hauled ass to our trailer to load my gear as quickly as I could, just so that I can go watch their whole set. And I had mentioned earlier that I'm a fan before ever a musician, and I was standing side stage and I watched them play like two or three songs. But then I looked out into the crowd, dude, and there was the biggest fucking circle pit I'd ever seen in my life happening. And I couldn't take it no more. I took off my vest, I took off my tour lanyard, and I hopped the fucking fence and went into the crowd. And I got in that fucking pit, dude. Oh my gosh. And I felt so alive because that was probably the biggest pit I'd ever been in. And it was at a big festival. And I remember I'm like running around in the pit, I'm pushing people, and people kept stopping me in the middle of the pit. They were like, weren't you just on fucking stage? It's like, what are you doing down here? And I was like, I fucking love Testament, and like, I mean, those are the moments. That's why I do what I do, because I get to do stuff like that. And then like I look at my phone, I was like, okay, it's time to leave. I was like, quickest way to get out of here, crowd surf to the front and to the behind this. I mean, dude, it was just epic. And so I always love when we get to play festivals, because I mean there's just so many bands you can watch, and you run into so many people, and sometimes you run into your heroes and your idols, and you're just like, oh my god, we're sharing a bill together. It's like I can't even believe this is happening.
Yeah.
And that's why like I always envy the fan in me for that, because I love watching bands play sometimes more than just playing, just because, especially if it's like a band that you really love and you're seeing how the crowd is reacting to it, and now all of a sudden you're doing the same thing, and it's such a unifying feeling, man.
Oh,
So definitely Blue Ridge, I feel like would stand out. um there was a couple shows uh that we played. Oh my gosh, where was it? There was a couple down in Florida that were cool. We did a show with Queensryche in Florida a few months back in October, November of last year. Uh, and ever since then, I've been really close with the Queensryche guys, which is a huge thing for me because that was another band I grew up listening to. And now, like, obviously, I still see them as the mighty Queensryche, but now I'm fortunate enough to call them my friends, and that's really cool too. Um, and then when I first joined the band in 2021, like 2 to 3 months after joining, we played with Blackstone Cherry in Lubbock, Texas. And John Fred Young, the drummer of that band, has always been an icon to me. Not just his playing, but his showmanship, his ability, his character, just everything that embodies that dude. So that was another moment where we got to share the stage with him. And, I was an insane fanboy, which I try not to be. I try to be like, I'm a professional musician and blah, but I can't help it. I'm just like,
yeah.
dude, like, Lonely Train. I remember watching Lonely Train when I was like 8 or 9 years old, and I was fascinated by it. And now, like, we're sharing a bill together. It's like, come on, man. Like, so I mean, any shows that we get to do like that, man, are probably some of the best. But I take any show as a blessing and an opportunity, and as just a good show, just because just getting to see the fans and hanging out with them and taking pictures and signing stuff, I never take that stuff for granted, man. But there are definitely some shows that do stand out for sure.
Yeah, Testament, I'll tell you real quick. I took my daughter, me and a buddy of mine went to Cincinnati. I live in Louisville, so we drove up to Cincinnati to see Testament and Sepultura in 2017. Prong opened. So we're hanging out backstage because that not backstage, but behind the venue. There were a couple of buddies were on that tour doing techs in front of house. So we're hanging out in the back, and I see Chuck, and I'm like, oh fuck. Run over like with my daughter, like, hey dude, really appreciate you. He's like, you want a photo? I'm like, take one with my daughter. He's like, oh yeah, and fucking she's over there like throwing up the horns. I'm like, fuck yeah. And then here comes Gene, and I'm like, this is the moment, like, because I was a huge fucking Death fan, right? And obviously he's the atomic clock, right? Like there's no fucking getting around it. So he sits and chats. Both of them took some time and chatted with us. And they took photos with my daughter. And I'm like, holy fuck, dude. Like, that is so cool. And she's like, yeah, that was all right. And now, like, she's older. This is, God, she's 10 at the time. She's 17 now. And now her friends are like, oh, yeah, I like metal. And she's like, oh, yeah. Like, I showed some pictures of people she met, and they're like, you're so fucking lucky. And I'm like, yeah, at the time, she was like, this sucks. Like, fuck. Uh,
Yeah, but and that dude, that's something that she's never gonna forget. You know what I mean? Just being like,
right.
yeah, my dad got me a picture with Chuck Billy. Now all my friends are listening to metal. I get to shove that in their face now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, and it's so funny. We did that. We went across the street to this pizza joint, and in walks fucking Paulo and Eloy. I'm
Dang.
like, the server comes over and I said, hey, send them beers. And she's like, are you sure? I'm like, fuck yeah, dude, whatever they're drinking, like, I'll buy. So she sends them over a couple of beers, and I wait, I let them get done eating, and I walk over. I said, hey, I don't mean to like intrude. Obviously, I'm a fan. Uh, do you guys mind? And they're like, no, totally cool. So they took a minute and took photos with us, and I'm like, fuck, dude, like that was a cool experience for me, let alone her.
Yeah, so badass. That's so awesome.
Fuck yeah. So who are you guys going out on the road with this time?
Man, it's just been us. We just been doing the headlining thing for a while. Sometimes we get to have opportunities, to play with Queensryche or Blackstone or whatever. I know we're doing a festival in July in Minnesota somewhere. We're doing it with Jackal and Smile Empty Soul and a couple other acts. So sometimes we get opportunities to play with bigger bands like that, which, in my opinion, I wish we would do more of. I like doing the headlining stuff. Like the luxury of being the headliner is, I mean, it's awesome. But I love just being on the road with bigger bands, getting in front of new fans, and again, always making those connections and making new friends that way. Um, because my first ever big tour that I ever did, I was just 18. I just turned 18. I got to tour with Crowbar and Battlecross and Misery Index when I was little, which I saw the with Huron and Brian. Those are my boys.
Oh,
So
you didn't watch
I
all of it because Tony showed up about hour three.
Tony is my favorite. Yeah, so that's a little backstory. Yeah, I think I just turned 18. Um, and I went to the NAMM show in 2015. I was there with Yamaha, and I met Zane, who is my singer and guitar player in Locust Grove. And so, like I was saying earlier, the Oklahoma music scene is very small. And Anti Mortem, the band that him and the guys from THC were in, were signed to Nuclear Blast. So they were a big band, and they had just split up. But they all went to the NAMM show, or not all of them. Zane and the drummer and the band and a friend of theirs went to the NAMM show, and I had run into Zane there. And I was like, dude, I'm a big fan. He didn't know who I was at the time, and I was like, dude, I'm a big fan of Anti-Mortem. You guys are fucking great or whatever. And he had looked me up. And when we got home from the NAMM show, he was like, dude, it's like you were at NAMM and you live like 10 minutes from me. It's like, how do we not know each other? And so that's when Locust Grove was kind of formed. Well, about a month or 2 months after the band was formed, he gets a call from a guy named Demetrius. And he was like, hey, a band I'm managing needs a drummer for two back-to-back tours they have coming up and possibly to be a permanent member. Do you know anybody? And at first he wanted Zane to do it because Zane is also a drummer. And he was like, no, I don't want to do it, but I know a guy. And so Zane calls me and he's like, hey, there's this band called Lord Dying out of Portland, Oregon that needs a drummer, and they have these big tours coming up. He was like, dude, you got to do it. And I always envy that because even though we were trying to start a band together, he was still in a way kind of looking out for me and been like, man, you need to go do this. I'll form the rest of the band while you're gone, but you need to go out there and you need to do it. And so I ended up taking the gig of Lord Dying, and I think it was 3 weeks of Misery Index. We did a tour with them, and then it was almost 7 weeks with Crowbar and Battlecross, about 7 or 8 weeks. And um, Yeah, those guys are they're some of my best friends. But I that was at that time I had never been like in a headlining tour position. And that's kind of what made me really appreciate just being the opening act or a supporting act on a big tour, because those connections and those relationships that I made on that tour, I still hold really close to me to this
Yeah.
day. And I still talk to those guys all the time and still try to go see them whenever they're in town. And those are connections that'll never go away. And that's why I'm always like, if we can headline and tour, that'll be great. Again, there's nothing wrong with being the having the luxury of being the headliner, but I really have a deep appreciation and a deep love for just being the supporting act. Just
Yeah.
like and it's cool because you can play 15 or 25, 30 minutes, whatever, go load up your trailer and you just get to chill for the rest of the night and watch a great show and hang out with fans. When you're the headliner, you have to pack up, but then you have to leave and you don't really get to hang out as much. And that's why, like, before, if we do headlining runs before we play, as soon as doors open, I'm in the line outside of the venue talking to people, taking pictures and hanging out with them and hanging out at the merch booth, just because I just love to hang out in that atmosphere. But being on that Crowbar and Battlecross tour when I was 18, that's all I did. I was in the pit every night for those guys, always hanging out with them and the fans, and just again, I feel like that's kind of when it started, that I just liked kind of making those connections with those people. But here lately with THC, we've just been doing like the headlining stuff. I more so get the support fixed with Locust Grove because in 2022 we toured with Charger, who is it's Matt Freeman from Rancid. It was his
Mm.
other band, and we got to do about a week and a half, 2 weeks with those guys. Which just those dudes are incredible. They're really cool. And
Matt's a
then
fucking badass, dude.
dude, and he's such a great dude. And again, it was kind of like that same situation, never meet your idols and never meet the guys you look up to. And when we got to tour with them for a week and a half, 2 weeks, and just getting to talk to him and the dudes, I mean, he was super fucking cool. And then before that, we got to do a tour with 96 Bitter Beings, which is Darren Miller from CKY, and the Native Howl, who's on tour with Clutch right now. Blacktop Mojo, No Resolve, another last year. Like Locust Grove got the tour of all those dudes as a support act. And so that's, those are the moments I really feel like I really get somewhere, is when I just again get to make those connections and make those relationships. I feel like those are very important, because in those situations, if those bands ever needed a drummer or if something ever happened, they know they can count on you because you guys are good friends now,
Yeah,
and those are the connections I really do envy. But as far as THC, we just do a lot of the headlining stuff now, and I hope in the future we can do a nice support tour, especially with the size that THC is. I feel like if we got a really good opportunity, it would be really great for us. So
for
fingers
sure.
crossed.
So you guys don't take any support acts out with you?
We do buy on bands, bands that want to buy onto the tour. Which I have
Yeah,
um, a certain distaste for that, if you will. I know business is business, money has to go somewhere. Uh, I am particularly not a fan of the buy on stuff, but I know even the bigger bands like Testament and whoever, a lot of the big bands still do the buy on things to this day, just when they can. Um, I know a lot of management companies and a lot of labels practice that still. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but that's just the way it is
so
now.
I'll tell you kind of funny about a buy-on band. So the Battlecross dudes, they're friends of mine, right? We've been friends for 10 or 12 years now.
Awesome.
So they were they were doing a European tour, and it just so happened that like Testament was over there also, and Testament had a buy-on band as direct support. Well, they connected, and Chuck's like, "Well, we're in the fucking same town. Why aren't you guys like?" So management talked, and Battlecross played a couple of shows with them. May have been one, but maybe a couple. And the fucking Battlecross was setting up front of stage, and then the Bion band, and then right Testament. And Chuck comes out and goes, "Fuck are you guys doing?" They're like, "Well, like we're the opener. He's like, no, no, no. Let the Bion band be the fucking opener. You guys are direct support. All right.
Yeah, yeah. That happens in a lot of cases too that I see. And um man, it's funny because I remember back when I was probably 13 or 14, very young, like, and that was the thing. Like when I first started taking music really seriously, well, it was like around 12, 13, 14, and eventually doing my first tour when I was 16. But I when I was younger, dude, I always wanted to reach for the stars, however much I could, and I knew that if you wanted to make it in this business, you not only had to just be good at your instrument, have talent, but you had to kind of be business minded, and you kind of have to think in that way. Which as a 13 or 14-year-old, business is dog shit. I don't know nothing about it, but I was just wanting just to get ahead of the game and try to really be serious about it. And I remember a couple times pitching my band at the time to some like management companies about playing, opening up for certain shows or even being on tours. And yeah, they used to give me the whole buy on spiel. Been like, well, if you want to, if you want to be a curtain jerker, you got to pay this much. If you want to be the second band, you got to pay this much. Direct support band, it's like an astronomical amount. And it's like, dude, it's like I'm 13, man. I got school tomorrow. It's like, what do you want me to do? It's like, but like I got a taste of that, like, when I was younger, and I see bands still do to this day, which, if you have the money and you want to go do it. I mean, I've met several of great bands and great people that are buy-on bands. I mean, some of my favorite people do it. Just to me personally, like I don't know if I would see that to be a good opportunity. And I only say that because when you buy onto a tour, obviously you don't get any of the show pay because you're kind of paying into it. So the only thing you get out of it is your merchandise sales, which fluctuates, not like a regular show pay would be. Like if you're guaranteed a certain amount or whatever, that's what you get. But like you better hope you do good that night, because otherwise you may not get gas to go to the next town,
Yeah.
because you would bring money with you, but you just spent all of that getting onto the tour. So now it's like every man for himself, like just start, hey,
Well,
and to
I
go
always look,
ahead.
I look at those buy on bands as like, I get it. I guess, people try to do it, but if bands quit buying on, it would just be talent that got them
For
to that
sure.
point,
For sure.
and it would, I think it would flesh out a lot of the bullshit. Like there's a lot of good music out there, also a lot of bullshit.
Yeah, well, and you can almost say that with the internet bans too. Like if money wasn't involved and the internet wasn't involved, then as you said, pure talent will just, that's all you would see on these big tours. And the thing I hate the most is that, like, there are some buy-on bands that are like, why are you guys on here?
Yeah.
It's like money talks and stuff, but like you do not belong on this tour. And then there are like, there's internet bands that get picked up more so than the bands that are actually out there grinding and doing the thing. And it's like now all of a sudden the market becomes flooded with people who just have money and not talent. And that really, it really shows, it really shows that when you go watch a band, you're like, okay, you're not that good, but you're here somehow. Somehow you're on this humongous bill and you're not really that good. Like, what really got you here? Then you start looking into it. It's like, oh well, okay, obviously, again, money talks for a good reason. That's how we live. It's how we survive. But the way I look at it is being on the road as a band, emotionally, physically, financially, is already hard enough. And so why go broke trying to hope that you'll make it, if instead of just having the talent and getting to a position to where you can at least make some money on tour, but you're not going broke doing it.
Yeah.
Like obviously you're not going to immediately get to millionaire status or thousandaire status right away. But like, man, I remember touring back in the day, just buyouts and some merch, and maybe you get some show pay, but you're not like forking out $5,000 or $10,000 to go on a tour that maybe you'll do good at. It's such a gambling game. It's such a game of chance, and it's dangerous, because and it's dangerous, and it's also sad because I've seen some bands in that predicament that they'll go buy onto a tour and then the band breaks up because they're like, oh crap, like I realize now that I'm out here and I'm playing my music to people, they're not really a big fan and we're not getting the reception that we wanted. And now we're broke and people don't like our music. So we might as well just quit. And that happens all the time too. And it's very
Sure.
unfortunate, And as you said, if all the money bullshit would be out of the equation and it would just be pure talent, I feel like we would see a lot more better bands on some of these tours for
Yeah,
sure.
I do too. I and I'm a fan of good bands on I love to go and just see a stacked bill and I'm like, oh, I fucking love every one of those bands. Super excited about Louder Than Life this year with Slayer coming back and, doing 3 shows. Like, I was always a big fucking Slayer nut.
Did you go see the farewell tour?
Oh yeah, fucking 8 or 9 times, I think.
Well, I guess Louisville, where you're at, all the major cities are kind of close to you, so you could just, few hour drive and you're somewhere.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? Like we did one of the shows was on my birthday in 2019 was with Amon Amarth, Cannibal Corpse, and Lamb of God. Yeah, so I'm standing in fucking line, and here comes Corpse Grinder walking out by the line, and it's like, George, what the? Yeah, what's up, dude? So,
I saw that final tour in 2019 also in Oklahoma. It was Napalm Death, Testament, Anthrax, and Slayer. What was cool about Slayer is obviously they had Gary Holt, which probably top 5 favorite guitar players of all time. All thrash metal needs to bow down to Gary Holt. That's enough said. But what I didn't know after seeing Slayer was that his dad's side of the family is from Oklahoma.
oh,
And I live on OU campus in Norman, and he had an OU guitar that he was playing up there. And OU is in the town where I live, so like it was like an immediate connection there. And I was like, yep, that's more so the reason why you're my favorite guitar player now. It's like now you're up there with Slayer with an OU guitar. It's so sick.
yeah,
Because his dad and his side of family were Sooner fans. He's up there shouting Boomer Sooner. It was fucking bucket list. But that was the only time I ever got to see Slayer was on their farewell tour. And then my dad, he's driving for Slipknot right now. He's hauling all their gear. And so I think Slipknot's on Louder Than Life, or maybe I'm wrong, but
no, they are.
yeah. So he gets to go to all those festivals and see all that shit. So I'm like vicariously living through that dude right now.
You're like, Dad, I'm gonna fly into Louisville so we can fucking hang out at Louder Than Life.
Dude, well, so Slipknot just did that private show at Pappy and Harriet's recently.
Yeah.
It was so funny. So 2 weeks before that show, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks before that show, he calls me, right? And he's like, hey, you're not going to believe this, but their company is wanting me to bring all of their gear. It was 2 trucks. It was him and another guy. He was like, they're wanting to bring all of their gear to some country bar in the middle of California. He was like, I'm thinking they're probably going to do like a music video shoot or something or do all that. And I was like, no, they're going to do a show. It's like, why else would they bring both of their trucks out there? And he was like, I don't know. It's like maybe, he just kept thinking music video shoot or just, whatever. He didn't think it was going to be a show. And then like all the billboards started popping up and Reddit started freaking going amok, in the thread. And like 2 or 3 days before it happened, he was told that it was a show. And he was like, how are they going to fit? There's like, what are they going to freaking do? And so he got to see that whole show firsthand. And I mean, we were just talking about Eloy earlier. God damn, dude.
What a fucking beast he is.
You
What?
know, that's the thing about drummers and which I don't know if a lot of drummers can relate to it, and maybe it might just be me. The biggest pet peeve that I have is I'm gonna go see a show, right? And obviously being a musician, more obviously being a fan and just enjoying the show, sometimes I catch myself like studying each member of the band. Like what is their gear looking like? How are they playing their instrument? You know, what kind of cymbals is he using? I'm like studying that shit. Nothing pisses me off more than going to see a show and that drummer is not spanking the fuck out of that drum kit. I can't fucking hear anything, dude. And like I know your drum set is mic'd up. That's the whole idea. I get it. But beat the ever loving fuck out of those things. I want to hear every hit if I'm going, whether you're playing in a dive bar or in an amphitheater. I don't care. I need to hear that you're hitting those drums. Otherwise, it turns me off completely. And that's why, like with and Jordison is obviously humongous influence. But like drummers like him, Eloy, Aldridge, John Fred Young, Will Hunt. I mean, I can name off so many guys, but like I watch these dudes play and they're beating the fuck out of these drums and they're putting on a show while they're doing it too. And I remember seeing a clip of Eloy playing, and this was like when he had just joined Sepultura, probably like over 10 years ago, and he was like a young kid.
Yeah.
Beating the fuck out of those fucking drums, dude. And I'm like, that sold me right there. And I've been following that guy ever since. And not to say that Jay wasn't great, and obviously Joey was the best, but when I saw live footage of Eloy playing Slipknot songs and how hard that dude already hits, I was immediately fucking happy.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. He fucking hits hard and he is all over the place when he plays, dude.
And I remember seeing the drum covers that Eloy did of Slipknot like last year. And, I grew up playing Slipknot songs like when I first started playing drums, and I see a lot of drum covers out there to where, they're playing like to the exact beat of the song or whatever, like they're not missing a note. But what immediately made me such a fan and already such an advocate of him being in that band was that like he would play the song, but he would add his own flavor to it. He would do certain fills that probably Jay or Joey would have never thought of doing.
Right.
It's like adding, he's a Brazilian guy too, and so like he kind of brought that little bit of flavor and tradition into the playing. And I'm just like, I didn't know Heretic Anthem could groove that much when he's just adding certain shit and then he's doing it live. I was just watching a clip of him playing some Slipknot songs last night. And it makes me happy that like a band of that, because I've heard of drummers like joining newer bands and they're like, don't do too much crazy fills, try to stick to the song as it is on the record or just whatever. And I'm just glad that, Slipknot is like the band for Eloy. That's just like, we already know how fucking good you are. We already know that you can murder all these songs. Just like be you, but still remaining in the vein of Slipknot. And so I was watching some of the live videos of him playing, dude, and he's doing those exact same very traditional, funky, groovy fills in a Slipknot song, and it fits perfect. And that makes me really happy to see because like it makes me have a little bit more faith in that band being like they're not like sticklers about you have to play it exactly like this. Like be you, express yourself and how you feel would benefit the song. Trust the drummer enough to know that like, hey, you got this. Like I trust.
Yeah, I mean, and he obviously had been performing at a high level for years, so they've to bring him in, they've got to have at least a little bit of trust in him. And you're right, dude. Like his style, I think fits really well with Slipknot and what they're wanting to do.
Totally. And the thing that I like too, which I was listening to somebody talk about this the other day, that there is such an important distinction between the record and live. And right. So like Black Stone Cherry is a perfect example. Like some of the stuff they do live, whether it be the guitar riffs or the drums, sometimes they don't mimic what's on the record because you go to a live show, you want to see it being played in live, like in person, in the present. Sometimes fans like to go see the live band and have it make them sound like the record. To me, I like that that sometimes, and it's not all the time, but there is a distinction between listening to the record and going to see the band live. I mean, they call it playing live for a reason, that it's very natural, it's very organic, things are going to be spontaneous, you're going to be taken surprised by some things. that's why sometimes like I see like a lot of the newer bands that like have embraced modern technology. Um, it's great, don't get me wrong, but it's like I go to see these bands live and they sound just like the record. And I'm like, that's cool and all, but like I want to see you play live.
Yeah.
You know, I want to see what you guys sound like live. I don't want to see you play just like the record, because if that were the case, I would just sit at home and listen to the record.
Well,
You
but
know,
I think some bands, right? Like that's them live. They want to be as close to record as possible, but which is cool, right? But it's like getting AC/DC. You know, every fucking album is going to be the same thing. You go see them live, it's the same show. It's a great show, you know, not knocking what they do, but you know, I think that's the reason there are so many different bands, because some bands you go out and their live show is just a little bit different than the record. It's enough that you notice it and you're like, oh, I really like what he fucking did there, you know, like that was a cool ass fill that he added.
right. Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like I like seeing bands that are living in the moment, just playing live. And you know, sometimes things are going to be different. Sometimes things are going to be spontaneous. That's the joy of going to a live show, is that you never know what you're going to get out of a live show. Now, again, I can go listen to the record 10 times in a row and it's going to sound exactly the same if I rewind it back. But
Yeah.
if I go see that band live, like obviously, yeah, I do want to hear the songs that are on the record. And, you know, as a musician, like if you're air drumming something and they play exactly what you're air drumming, then you kind of like, hell yeah, like
Yeah.
I knew, you know, that's a really good fucking fill. Or, you know, because that's like going to see Genesis or Phil Collins live and him not doing the exact fill in the air tonight. Like
Right.
that kind of stuff. Yeah, that kind of stuff I do get. But like with some bands, I just like feeling like they're living in the same moment as me, to where like I'm about to witness something that may not be on the record but sounds fucking sick, you know,
Yeah.
or just like, you know, because I've started noticing some bands recently that they stop playing to a click, you know, so that means like the tempo might be slower but it sounds heavier, or they might go faster, or, you know, Metallica is a perfect example. They don't play to a freaking click, you know, like why do you think Master of Puppets sounds 5 times faster than it does on the record? And speaking of Slipknot, one thing that really stood out to me was that Mick Thompson did an interview recently, talking to a guy, and he was like, Mick Thompson was like, dude, it's like when we're live, we're in the moment. Anything we say goes. Like that's what being a part of a live show is. He was like, you know, there's no click, there's no being tied to something. Like you're getting what you're getting when we go on stage. And he brought up, he was like, why do you think Strutter on Kiss Alive sounded so fantastic and so mean and so real? They weren't playing to a click back then, and they were on fire at that point because they weren't being restrained by no click and, you know, none of that. You like, they plug into a guitar and an amp and that's the show you're getting, you know. And like when I heard him say that, I really kind of started to think on that statement and been like, you know, he's got a good point. Like when a band goes on stage and they play live, you don't know what you're going to get, but you're going to
Right.
get that band live. And sometimes seeing the band live sometimes sounds better than the record, you know, because it's like, damn, like these fucking guys are on fire. Like, you know, we're on the Slipknot train here. All Hope Is Gone is probably my favorite Slipknot record of all time. And I say that because I remember in 2008 going to see them at the Mayhem Fest, which was the only Mayhem Fest I ever got to go to. And just how just unrelenting and just how take no prisoners kind of attitude it was, because it was such a huge comeback for them. And I prefer seeing that era live than I do listening to the record, just because it was just fuck you, we're Slipknot, this is what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
And Pantera, you know, Pantera, that was another band I idolized growing up because they were the same fucking way. You
Oh,
know, it
did
was
you? Sorry, just kind of on the Pantera thing real quick. Did you see Down just announced a one-off in New Mexico?
yes. And I'm so fucking happy for that.
Yeah.
I am so happy, especially because of Kirk. And you know, I've known Kirk for a long time. I just saw Crowbar in Dallas a few
Kirk will
weeks
be
ago.
on I think they're in Europe at that time.
Yeah, yeah. But just like that whole presidents of their I'm absolutely freaking here for it.
Yeah.
You know, but Down is another good example. Like those are the kind of bands that they're not tied to any of that stuff. They're raw, they're real, they're in your face. That's the live show you're gonna get. And that's why I feel like Pantera shows were so, monumental in that way, because every night it was a different thing. Every night they would add in something or they take away something. You just had to be there to witness something like that,
Yeah.
and it was just so spontaneous. And that's what I look for in a live show, just
Always looking for that moment where you're like, oh, this won't happen again. That's fucking
that's
cool.
the thing, a one of a kind moment. And so
Yeah.
when Mick Thompson was talking about that in an interview and he had related it to Kiss Alive, it's like, fuck, man, he's right. Like Kiss sounded on fucking fire because they are just a live band. That's just a band that you just have to experience live, just like Slipknot, Pantera, Down. You can listen to the records, but experiencing them live, it's something that you just have to do. It's something that you won't get just by listening to the record. So I just think that the distinction between a record and a live show is just something to me that is just so important, and just not only just being a fan, but just being a musician too.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. All right, Joey. Dude, I appreciate you. I think we've had a fucking killer conversation. We're running on time.
I know we kind of get in the moment, we kind of get carried away, man. But dude, I'm blessed, I'm honored, and I'm fortunate to be on the show and talking with you, man. I really do appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, dude, it was a lot of fun. There was a lot of good conversation.
I
Uh,
agree, man.
well, cool, dude. I appreciate you. It was great. I look forward to seeing you guys on the road.
Yes, hopefully when we come up to Louisville or anywhere in your area, man, we can actually hang out in person and shoot the shit.
Hell yeah, dude. I'm here for it.
Right on, man. Please be safe, and we'll see you soon.
You too, brother.